Welcome back, Spokane, to another episode of EvoReal Talks. I'm your host, Matt Side, and this is my co-host.
Hi, Jessica Side here.
And we are very excited today because we have with us as a special guest, Lars Gilberts, who is the CEO of the University District here in Spokane, Washington. And I heard Lars speak in 2018, so a few years ago, at a Realtors Young Professional Network event that we did at the University District. And I will say that how I ended that, when I left that conversation, I was re-inspired about my own community, about the city of Spokane. And so we are extremely excited to have Lars here to talk about the U District. And
wait, before he introduces himself, let me just say, Lars, when he came home, boy, did I have an earful. I mean, he was just like so excited, and he was just like and this and that and the other. And so we're very happy to have you here. So I think what Matt was about to say was, would you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are, sir.
Thank you so much for having me. Yes, I get to lead the University District, and it's two organizations. So I get to kind of express all of my different passions through the different work that we do. But it's wonderful to be here because my dad grew up north of Spokane.
Really?
Yeah, and so this has always been home. I've actually moved, I think it's 36 times in 14 areas in 3 countries. And so it was very intentional that I moved here. I love Spokane. I'm pretty passionate about it. As you could probably tell from before, it's great to be back, and it's great to not just to work here, but help shape what Spokane gets to become.
So, okay, so now I have to ask the question. Did you grow up here? Were you born here? Like your dad lives here? What's the connection to your childhood, if any?
So are you asking, do I pass the Spokane question of where I went to high school?
No. Yeah, I kind of want to know.
I wish. I started my academic career here in kindergarten, but after that, I can joke about it, but really my family tells a different side of the Spokane story. We were some of the economic refugees, that the jobs weren't necessarily available here. My family grew up north in Clayton, that we had that farm that when things didn't go perfectly, that we lost that farm. Actually, the WSU School of Veterinary Medicine, they helped try to save. We had a disease that came through that just had too much losses, and we lost it. And so, but we knew other people that lost their job from other businesses or industries closing. And so we moved, and we lived in Kellogg and a bunch of other areas in the area. Yeah. But my dad actually joined the military to be able to provide for his family.
Wow.
And so they went on for additional education and other things. And I saw my dad, first generation education for both my parents actually, and seeing that make a difference. Which is why I really care about education.
Yeah.
But
yeah, for sure.
In that, we moved all over, lots of stories there. But in the end, I love this area, and there weren't as many opportunities to come back, which a lot of us struggle with. But when there was that opportunity, I definitely jumped on it and trying to create more opportunities for others.
That's fantastic. I love that. First of all, just so you know, whenever we drive anywhere near Clayton, we go to get ice cream at the Clayton, what is it called?
Clayton Burger.
Yeah, man.
So when I was a kid, my grandmother had a lake property on Waits Lake. So we would drive in the summertime, we would drive by and through Clayton all the time. And that was kind of the tradition on our way home and I've carried that on anytime we're that direction.
That's right.
Half and half, soft serve.
That's right.
That's the swirl. Most of my families work there, and actually, because family sometimes by choice, not by birth, the balls that actually started that are related to me. They're related.
Really? That's fantastic. I love it.
Perfect small world Spokane story.
So let's be, I know we've got lots of questions, but of course I'm intrigued by just the changes when I think about you being here as a child and your parents being here, and then the economic difficulties. Spokane has not always been, super industrious or able to sustain the people that are here. So you go away and then you come back because there are changes, and then you become part of that change. Like you literally become part of the catalyst, literally and figuratively, that makes a big change. How does that feel?
It's phenomenal. It's one of those things that both, I think we need to make some new words, like especially after the pandemic. I think it reminds us that there's, I used to live in Germany, and Germans have got some great words for some random things. And we need some words to fill in the blank, and that healthy balance of recognizing that you're part of something meaningful, but also that sober reality that you wouldn't have been able to do it without generations of work preceding you. Just even an example, as the name of the Catalyst building that you're kind of alluding to, that word came from a master plan that was worked on from 2001 to 2004, before the University District was even created. And we realized that the bridge would be a catalyst, and then a vista, as they continue to be a catalyst for a community, they took it further and said, hey, let's not just talk about it, let's do it. Let's not talk about innovation, let's actually show it.
Wow.
And so it's amazing that the university builds on so many legacies. And now, as we're here in the 2020s, Spokane has not boomed since 1920s.
Right.
And so when we look at that, no one living has ever experienced what Spokane might be starting to go through, which I firmly believe, which is both exciting but also terrifying, in that if we don't think differently, we could become victims of our own success. And the things that we've mocked before, we could suffer under if we don't start shifting how we think, so we can preserve the things that are near and dear to our hearts.
Yeah, actually reminds me of when they developed the parks in Spokane, which I've done a whole series on that on the radio, and just the forward thinking, like, what do we want our city to look like in 100 years? Do we want a zoo in the middle of town, or do we want it to be a part, let's get rid of that, let's put a pond in, and that, not good or bad, just making a decision on what is important to us, green spaces, sustainability, all those things that we have to think about that now, because hopefully in 100 years, somebody will be doing a radio show talking about the things that you've done and how it impacted Spokane in a positive way. That's the goal, right? Absolutely. Okay, I'm sure Matt has some questions. So I'm going to let him.
There's so much to unpack there just in that last period that you were talking, Lars. And I want to come back to it. Just your comment on how it's exciting and terrifying at the same time, and how we have the potential, unfortunately, become the victim of our own success if we're not careful. But before we dive into something like that, let's come back to talk to us about what the University District is, because as a resident in the city of Spokane, in my mind, the University District is just a part of town that there's universities, and it's just a district of town that has universities there, but it's so much more than that. So maybe just share with us, what is the University District? What is its purpose, its mission, those type of things?
Sounds good. So it, like anything that the government touches, or a bunch of committees, we're alphabet soup. And so we've got a bunch of acronyms that I would kind of want to break down. So there is a University District revitalization area, and it's 770 acres. And it goes north of Gonzaga, which makes a lot of sense, obviously, all the way down to the highway, to I-90. And it goes just a little bit west of Division Brown, and a little bit east of Hamilton and the river. So that's, 770 acres is about twice the size of our downtown core.
Wow.
Kind of three different sections. North of the river, Gonzaga, our historic university and Logan neighborhood. The center area, formerly kind of the Riverpoint area, and this expansion area south of the tracks. And it's really the past, present, and future of the University District. But it's really built on this legacy, which is exciting for me, because when you look back, we look at transportation in Spokane, and the University District really represents past, present, and future of connection in our community. When you look at the rivers, our major transit corridors of both highways and interstates, as well as mass transit, walking trails, you name it, every possible way to get around town intersects in the University District. And so we are a connection point in so many different ways, which is partly why with the bridge, it's kind of another form of connection that when we're looking at ideas move with people, not with cars or anything else. And so this kind of goes back to Expo 74, like everything in Spokane,
Yeah.
and Momentum 87. So Expo 74, Scrappy Startup Spokane is essentially saying, how do we make this work? In that process of freeing up railroad space,
Yep.
there was extra land that was freed up, but was never developed. And that was a lot of, there was 38 acres that kind of in that area, in the center part of the university district. So we brought the world to see Spokane, but we didn't have a lot of things to keep them. And after the next recession, in that lead up, about 100 business leaders came together, locked themselves away for several days, and then came away with 10 strategies for 10 years and over $1 million a year, separately fundraised from anything else to implement those. And so I get to build on the legacy of Momentum 87, and kind of three things I would point out that we get to really deliver on is one, Spokane is in some ways a government town, that we're the regional hub for a lot of things. So for transportation,
Right.
banking, and government, the region doesn't exist, and healthcare without Spokane.
Right.
What do we really create? And they recognized education, innovation, research is at the core of a self-refreshing community. And, here, and at that time, Gonzaga even, we produced some good accountants, but it wasn't really known for a lot of other things necessarily, other than kind of within the network of the Jesuit and Catholic education. That's kind of what it was. It was in town, but not really of the town. And then we had Eastern and WSU, and everything was away from town.
Right.
These leaders recognized that until we had research and education centrally located in town, we wouldn't really get the commercial benefits. So centralized education, and then commercialization of that. The very first business, the first building in the university district was CERTI. So that opened up in 1994. And David Clack and others can tell you the story of how all that came together. And really over like it was supposed to take about 50 years. No one believed it could happen as quickly as it has happened. And it's really defied a lot of logic and kind of bucked the trend of things that have happened in Spokane.
Sure.
And so it's amazing. Like really, we went from one university in this area to over 6 colleges and universities represented, approaching 20,000 students, staff, and faculty,
Wow.
2 medical schools, like some crazy things that have happened to make that possible. So commercializing that potential, CERTI was one of the first ideas that has continued in a lot of different ways. And then the third one is businesses and ideas don't grow without money. They're the liquid rain that help these ideas grow. And so the idea of early stage venture capital funding and angel investment has led to a lot of the work that Tom Simpson and others are working on, and especially the Spokane Angel Alliance. So those are just 3 of the 10 strategies that really have a strong tie to the university district. So more I could say on that.
That's wonderful. No, that's so helpful. Go ahead.
Last thing I would just briefly mention on that is, after all of that, so Momentum 87, great. The momentum eventually dies away. And so as we have this next round of recessions, and again, Spokane is very nimble, like something's happening, what do we do? How do we respond? And so the community, and this is where Avista, I have to constantly give them praise for a variety of reasons, but one of the things they do is they have loaned executives. And they had one, Kim Pierman-Gilman, she's currently with Numerica, but she was on loan with the city. And she'd previously done work with WSU, and she just saw the potential. So in partnership with the city and other groups, they envisioned a university district that's not just made up of some co-located activities, but true synergy, like not just saying the word, but doing it. And they developed a master plan. And then they recognized that until they got an organization to own this, momentum would keep on being built and then dissipate, built and dissipate. And so they created the University District Development Association, the nonprofit that then was able to create the Public Development Authority that provided some of the funding that allows for a bridge, Sprague redevelopment, and a variety of other things that, but for us, how does this area not thrive? Where are there gaps? People don't, the city has to focus on the entire city, cannot just focus on their pet projects.
Right.
But we, as like a mini city and a mini chamber, can really focus on building this area and then making it usable for the entire community. That would be the last point that I would make, is that especially now that the PDA is up and functioning, it is solely focused on the 770 acres.
Right.
But this nonprofit now gets to focus back on this legacy that Expo 74, Momentum 87 wasn't just for downtown, wasn't just for Spokane, it's for the regions. For my family north of town, we want to create jobs for the entire region. We want this to be a healthy, more vibrant region. And every district, every community will contribute to that larger health in different ways. But in the end, we don't want to create it where everybody has to have a job in the university district and we just clog our roads and highways. No, we want to catalyze opportunities, not just for the city, but for the region.
I love that. That's amazing.
Told you he's inspiring,
Yeah,
right? You're
man.
re-inspired about
I
our whole region.
That's amazing. Let's talk a little bit about the Catalyst building, because you just had in September,
Right, in
the
September.
grand opening. And so this is the one
How long? So in 2018, people were talking about it. So it was obviously being designed, and I don't remember if you had broken ground on it yet or not. Like, how long was it start to finish before you guys were able to get that to the point of a grand opening?
So in 1998, I wish I were fully joking. So I would say that the vision of the bridge started in 1998. And the bridge led to thoughts around the master planning in 2001 to 2004. And then it was from that plan that Avista started realizing that they had an acre of land right at the south landing of the bridge. And while energy infrastructure is important, having a substation right at the south landing of the bridge was perhaps not the highest best use of that land. And they wanted to be a good community partner rather than just, it's my dirt, I do what I want with it. And so again, they tried to figure out how could they use that land to do something bigger and better, which led to then both acquiring land, cleaning it up, finding a development partner that wasn't just looking to build something, but catalyze additional development and bigger ideas. And so I think it was layering all of that. And they went through some different development partners, but in the end, they settled on McKinstry and Katera to help set that new standard. So you could pick a lot of different points in there, but it was something that was iterative and building, and they're still trying to explore that, because I think one of the things that you may be aware of, that there's a Scott Morris Center for Energy Innovation, and there's a bunch of things in there, including an energy lab and a brand new business that McKinstry and Avista co-formed called EDO. And it is all focusing on the future of energy and how buildings and the grid and everything connect. And they're not just creating jobs for Spokane, but solutions for the world, quite honestly.
Awesome.
Man, that is exciting. That is just so cool. And when you learn about just how the building was built with sustainability in mind, and I believe that it also has a lot of green features. Can you just kind of give us a quick list of some of those?
Whew.
Just a little something.
So I would offer a variety of things. So one, it's one of the first eco districts that we've had in this region again. So that looks like, when you look at the steam plant, we used to not have every building be self-sufficient. We recognize the interdependence of buildings, and kind of that centralization can actually be more efficient. And so they've kind of gone back to that energy, that one waste product. Like, so how many times, is one person too hot or too cold? Buildings can function that same way. And so when one is producing more energy or has more heat, how do you transfer some of that? And so there's a variety of elements within that of both reducing the need for energy, but also sharing it between buildings more efficiently.
That's cool.
And that hub building, the Scott Morris Center for Energy Innovation, is designed to be able to serve multiple buildings. And so there's already conduit so that as there's more buildings, that they can balance usage and have lower impact on the larger grid. And just as a kind of a note, when people say Avista, most of what I've talked about is Avista development, which is on the private side, the public utility. We're not subsidizing what's being built there. And yet the innovations that are happening there and the energy savings do benefit the larger public utility. Which is kind of a neat thing. And I've worked with energy companies in different parts of the world. I have never had a partner like Avista. I'll just leave it there.
Yeah.
But just everything from the building stores carbon in the cross laminate timber that it has. It is way more efficient in its use of energy. We talked about the sharing. There's a new building, and I could talk about how this one building connects all of Spokane from the valley out to the West Plains, because there was a new business that was created called Overcast that actually has different panels that have all the different HVAC and sensory technology and lighting built that plug into the ceilings for buildings like this, that allow it to be more usable, more efficient, and just more enjoyable in general. So they've got a website, SpokaneCatalyst.com, I think it is, that lists all the different great things that the building can do. But the exciting thing is, it's not just about a building, it's about an eco district.
Right.
Yeah.
And ideally, this technology is something that can also be retrofit into existing buildings and schools and other things. Like, where are we wasting energy, wasting water, wasting all these things?
Mm-hmm.
And through better conservation, we can actually save money and have more sustainable growth in a community.
Wow. We will make sure that that link is on our on this Facebook post, so that if people want to go look at that, obviously they can go straight there. They can go to our Facebook. That's amazing.
Well, and I think when you talk about Avista being such a great partner with this, and I can appreciate that there's the development side, and then there's the utility itself. But the fact that they're so forward thinking, thank you, because in this day and age, not everyone that generates electricity and sells it is forward thinking in how to do that and also be responsible with our planet at the same time. And so I'm so appreciative of them as a utility being willing to look at alternative methods, and at the same time asking the questions, how do we make this not just sustainable, but profitable too? Because we have to, I was watching a couple of the clips of the videos when they did the opening of the Catalyst building in September. And one of the things that the gentleman from Avista was talking about was that we had to build this, but we had to make it affordable too, not just like spend a crap ton of money on something because it was smart construction and yet was a massive loss in the long run. And so really having that think tank around how to make it affordable and make it, all of those other things.
Exactly.
One of the things that I wrote down from our, I'll say conversation, even though you were just talking to a group of people in 2018, was that
Matt wishes it was just a one-on-one.
It was nearly a one-on-one. I was totally locked in. Smartest 5 blocks in the world. Was that like at the time? Is that still the case? Like, what does that even mean? And was I correct when I wrote down the world, or was it the United States?
So that is a great question. I feel like we could have a philosophical conversation now. But I would offer that was an aspirational goal that Scott Morris set, and that is still being digested. So it was the world, because in the end, the adage of if you aim for the stars, you at least land in the trees. And yeah, so I think a variety of things, and this has been a re-engaged conversation. So even though the CEO now is now Dennis Vermillion, and he is really focused on making sure that those the utility costs stay low for our community. That is as housing costs increase, transportation and energy are other critical factors for people's budgets. And so they're really focusing on how to keep that low while also not abdicating responsibility on this. Because we're finding that the world and part of our economic growth is on what do we stand out for? Spokane can no longer brag about being cheap. We never really should have, but that is not our key value proposition. It has to be about value and quality.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I would offer is the continuing conversation is about, what would the 5 smartest blocks look like? But that they've always been clear on that does not mean the most censored. We know as humans that, I don't know what for you. So I think, you got a smartwatch there maybe? I don't know. But I know for me, I don't even wear a smartwatch anymore because that phantom vibration in our pocket from their phone, I would start getting that on my wrist. And we recognize that just because there's more sensors that can do cool things for us does not necessarily always make a better quality of life.
Right.
So how do we balance that? And something that I love, and Letitia Hill, she is the one that has kind of brought this up. She works at Avista and leads some amazing work there. But she talks about how utilities have always been about health and public safety, but we forget that. Now we just want our power on. We want the water to be clean and flow when we want. And we don't think about how paved streets and lights and fresh water, this is what has created and preserved civilization, quite honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Like even in the pandemic right now, we've had less loss of life percentually than we did, 100 years ago, in part because we have some more of this basic healthy infrastructure. We just take it for granted. And so for now in the 21st century, what is that? What is that smart technology that when we look to move further away from fossil fuels, if we have electric cars, how do those possibly support the grid? And so Avista is thinking through some of those things and how do we test? So that the energy models, they ran over 40,000 energy models to be able to develop that system.
Wow.
And it's designed to be able to run new ones. So right now, the system behind us is designed in a way that it can test different things within a building and within a grid. And so part of what they're looking at is we don't even know what the biggest problems are of the future. And so how do we create an infrastructure and a system and groups of people? And this is their biggest focus often is how do we draw the right people that can solve those problems? And so when we look at the 5 smartest blocks, it's not just about the infrastructure, but the people using it.
Yeah.
That's great.
No, that's excellent.
So let's change gear just a little bit.
Absolutely.
Is that all right? Okay. So I want to talk about the district. So the district is something that we talked about in January. We kind of already said, I want to talk about the difference between some of the other, the Catalyst building, which is more of a business building. And
Just
then
a school, the Eastern Washington University is in that building, correct?
Okay, he knows better than I do. But I want to talk just a little bit about the district and why is this going to be different from any other potential housing in Spokane?
Yeah. Well, it's awesome, first of all.
We'll make sure there's some links and things so people can go look at the pictures and stuff. So.
Well, and it's good because I've actually got it over here. I'm looking at this picture. So I've got an overhead view of the renderings, and it's right on the extended Centennial Trail, right by the river. Like, where else can you find that?
Yeah.
So, on a warm summer day, or any time, like especially pandemic, man, we've been out walking and moving because we can't be around each other.
Right.
You're downtown, or you're by the Riverpoint Village, and you're out on the Centennial Trail, and you're right by it, and the marmots are scurrying around, and just like you're near nature. Well, going back to our old tagline, near nature,
right.
Near perfect. Like it's amazing, but because of additional laws and changes, we can't build any more housing like that. And so unless you can afford a lake property, out in some place, and the taxes that go with it,
right.
The chances for you to be able to enjoy that type of lifestyle are just kind of non-existent anymore. But because there was a binding site plan before those laws changed, they were able to develop this And it is absolutely amazing. And one thing that there's no other place like this is what would it look like to have a covered urban park? This has got that. It's like our own version of the troll. So like, I am so excited to see what this is going to be able to look like. And yeah, so I think it's beautiful, it's accessible. And as Spokane, we've talked about transit-oriented development, but honestly, since we had electric trolleys, that's not been really feasible in the same way that it would be with this. That honestly, if you're working downtown or a lot of different places, this is one of now a few places that are being developed where like, do I need a car? Or
Right.
focus on when I need a car, I will access one versus I need a car, I need two cars, I need,
right.
No, not necessarily. And again, that changes when we look at people's budgets. Housing and transportation is often the best way to see it combined. That yeah, you could live out in Sprague, you could live out in Deer Park, and have probably a more cost-effective life. But as we grow, those prices are getting less, and the cost for transportation keeps on growing.
Right.
But it's that combined cost, and for a lot more families, being able to live and be able to lower or eliminate your transportation costs is a real way to consider making your life balance.
Yeah. And so when he talks about the covered park area, or if you can picture it, it's the
Hamilton Bridge that is the roof.
Yeah, it's going to go over the top of that. So there'll be, and it's on the river. I mean, here's the thing is that I'm so excited for Spokane. I've lived here almost my whole life, and I have seen it, in all of those. I was born in 1974. My parents took me to Expo as a little baby. And we moved away for a little bit and came back. And I have seen these places that have been abandoned, right? And Kendall Yards is a perfect example of that. It was a place where it was just dirt and kind of gross. And somebody said, and it took a long time, just like, this is for you. This is a journey. And we see that, and I think that's not the only place in Spokane that can have that. And that's exciting to me to see these other developments, places that are taking these beautiful areas where we can see the river and making them something special. And I just get so excited. As a Spokaneite, it is just thrilling for me.
And I love that. I love the integration too. So another thing that you talked about back in 2018 that is still in process, because I wrote a quote down that I've had on my wall for a long time from Bill Gates. And it says, people often overestimate what will happen in the next 2 years and underestimate what will happen in 10. And I've found in life that to be extremely true, that I think I'm going to hit whatever my goal is in the next couple of years and don't even come close. And yet a decade goes by and I'm like, holy God, look at how much I've accomplished, or look at how much Spokane has grown.
Yeah.
And so I think that's exciting. But the integration within downtown, because I know the City Line, Spokane Transit, the idea behind that, as I understand it, is to go all the way from Brown's Addition and out to the Spokane Community College and make that kind of pull that together with mass transit, so that you do live in a place like the district, that it is a real reality. Do I even need a car right now?
Mm-hmm.
Because could I just catch the transit line? Can I walk there? Can I use a line bike? Whatever that might be, which is an exciting concept to really revitalize kind of that downtown core and then the living spaces around that core.
Exactly.
Fantastic. All right. I have some other questions.
Go for it.
I want to make sure. Okay.
No, you go for it.
So I have some questions because you've got, again, I mentioned, I counted 38 projects on a website. It was very diverse in look and in functionality. I would like to know, I've got a few questions. I'm going to ask you 3 questions. Okay. What are you most excited about, like right now today? Okay. Of those projects, what has been the most challenging project? If you can, you can tell us something. And then what to you is the most personal? So it just has a personal feel to it. Those are my 3 questions.
Oh, wow. Oh, I appreciate the order because I'm distracted by that third one. I'm going to lay on the couch and think on this. So So the first one, what I'm most excited about, or
Yeah.
is that, yeah. So I think one is I've got some pretty strong, but a little bit mixed feelings about the reality that 18, 20 months from now, we're going to have over 600 more units of housing in the university district. And realistically, there'll be more in process, and there are some that have just been converted right nearby. And that is so exciting. And I'm so excited to welcome people into a part of town that they don't remember, because it didn't exist in, a year ago, or 10 years ago. And just how many times have I heard over the last couple of years of people, family that have left Spokane, they're wherever they are in the world, they came back for Thanksgiving or something else, and people drove them underneath the bridge. They drove them around, they're like, what is happening?
Yeah.
What is Spokane that I know about? And I think for people that even live here regularly, this fall, especially as we get some construction work done, as people are just out and active more again, it is not the Spokane and not the university district that people remember. And that's going to continue to happen. The bittersweet side of it for me is that, can you imagine if we'd have had an extra 1,000 people living downtown before the pandemic? How many restaurants, how many businesses, how many jobs would we have saved?
Right.
On the flip side, how many jobs, how many businesses will we help create and sustain? When downtown is a neighborhood. How many of us remember Portland or Seattle at a time when, oh my gosh, you could shoot a cannonball down the street because they had mass transit and this other stuff, but nobody was living down there.
Right.
Spokane, we don't necessarily think of it or feel it the same way, but we're going to notice it when there's people living, working, and playing. And we're not yet a 24/7, but at least an 18/7, active community.
I have to say something, because before you even said the businesses, I was going to say the thing that excites me about that is, I have a passion for local business. Like, that's such an important piece of the community. It's the person across the street that has a yoga studio. It's the person down the street that owns, one of my favorite restaurants. It's the, the people that own the kitchen store, and those people in the university district. There's some wonderful places down there, and just to have them, they're not gonna be rich. We're not all trying to be rich, but they want to have a life and a business that can sustain that life. And it's exciting to me to think about those places, just like you said, to be able to have them thrive and do well is exciting.
Well, two quick thoughts. First of all, just last night, my daughter, who is 16, for whatever reason, she said, "Mom, walking downtown is super underrated. Like, that is totally fun. Like, I need to do that more." And, obviously she's now just coming to an age where she and her friends can kind of go walk downtown, and soon expectedly that they'll be able to go into more stores more easily. And, as things continue to open up, and it will actually, I think, blossom for her even more. So that's exciting, because as that grows and people live down there, and then there are more places and shops and restaurants and pubs and all of the things that we love. But I want to come back to what I told you we would come back to before you go on to Jessica's next set of questions, was the terrifying aspect of it. Because I think when you say how exciting it is that shortly there's going to be 600 new units in the U district, the terrifying aspect of this is that we could potentially become victims of our own success. And I'd love to give you an opportunity to expand on what that means to you.
So we bring in some Malcolm Gladwell and others. No. So I think maybe a good idea is where this could be the best or the worst thing is thinking about tipping points. I think that we are on some things. I think we've already reached a tipping point, and some things we're already beyond. If I'm not mistaken, Spokane ranks the highest rate of rental cost increase of any place in the state. Like, that's terrifying. That's dangerous for our families in so many ways. So I think if that's a tipping point that allows us to start developing more parcels that previously under the old model didn't necessarily make sense, and people wanted easier ways to develop, maybe maybe that's a good tipping point. So I think there's always this opportunity of, if um, if we and our culture doesn't change, we will destroy ourselves.
Mm.
However, if we can embrace growth and change, and see how that makes our life better, then it's exciting. So as an example, like, go Zags right now, please. But if and when we were so lucky to get a ticket, it is that parking that's a challenge. The city line is going to go right by that. Can you imagine a time where someone says, hey, the line is running every 7.5 minutes. Why would I go deal with that traffic? I'm going to go jump on that. Or the same thing when we're talking about downtown stadium. And I personally am really hopeful that we have a downtown stadium, just because in the end, like Joe Albi, there's going to be more and more pressures in that community.
Yeah.
But when we look at if we had 3 high-performance transit lines around a downtown stadium, so that people regularly, several times a month, no matter where they lived in the community, like, hey, I want to go enjoy that. I don't want to deal with parking, but I've got this other option that is so easy that it takes about the same amount of time and it's way less stress.
Yeah.
So that's the things that I'm really excited about, where if we learn on that. And actually, I was talking to someone on the transit side of things, and I see some really interesting and exciting things that could potentially connect Northern Idaho even with this area, that just put more pressures on the interstate. So all that to say, I would say that the idea of that cultural elite strategy for breakfast, I can work all day long on strategies, but in the end, I want to create a vibrant experience for people, so that they change, that the culture changes, so that people want to do the thing that's in their and the community's best interest, and it's something they want to do rather than they're forced to do it. But realistically, there is this balance of pain that, Liberty Lake is great, but if you're working downtown, can we find you some good housing options so that you can live and work right near where you are?
Yeah, and I think that tension is so critical, because even when you're talking about the stadium, I think that it's so short-sighted of the Spokane community to say, let's put all these millions and millions and millions of dollars into Joe Albi versus something that's more central and core based as we're growing. And that's the tension, right? Of educating our own community as to, like, if we don't invest correctly in our community, then that's when we do become a victim of our own success, because nobody wants to go to Joe Albi because it's so far away and the traffic to get there is so
and what do you do to that community? What do you do to those houses that, if they want to have a party at the same time that there's an event, where do the people that are coming to their house even park? I mean, it really becomes a real challenge. So here's what I want to say before we go back to the most challenging. That's what's coming up next. Just in case you want to think about it. No, but I just love, I think that there's this amazing kind of tug, and not a tug of war, but a back and forth when you talk about your own district. Like, this is what you're focused on, but you have to think about greater Spokane, greater region. And it's self-interest, but it actually benefits other people and other places. When we talk about North Idaho, and it's a great thing. I feel like it's a responsibility of a big development like this, right? With all these different ideas, to think about how it fits into the larger community, not just financially, but, I'm going to use the word spiritually, but like that, because there is that responsibility that you got to make sure that the health of the greater area is considered. And I think that's a really cool, I love hearing that from you, that it's not just all about this one little area. It is a much broader and thoughtful plan, which is really cool. All right. Most challenging project.
I'm going to go with Sprague Phase 2. And I could go on for a while. But I would offer a couple different things. And this is where And I think each of us in our professional lives, in our personal lives too, need to kind of, it's difficult to sometimes recognize and embrace our superpower as individuals and as organizations, really know what do we do well.
Mm-hmm.
And the university district really focuses on, but for us, what wouldn't happen, couldn't happen. But when you try to really put that into reality, woof, it's much more challenging sometimes. So I think one thing that hadn't really been done, so we were kind of breaking new ground, and that's not always fun, being at the bleeding edge of of some of these things. So the city created the PDAs, but when we needed to stand up and advocate for something that kind of needed to nudge the city in a certain direction, the city has done some phenomenal investment in the university district and across the area. And yet, Sprague Avenue was not the city's top priority. Riverside was the next project. And one of my first things that I needed to do, and I needed to both embrace, and I'm grateful that my superpower and the organization's need kind of work together. I looked forward and I'm like, we didn't know about 976, we didn't know about the pandemic, but I knew at that time already that if we waited until the city had all the money and the timing, we would miss some real growth opportunities. That this catalyst would not catalyze development. It would be a standalone, sad monument to lack of forethought.
Gotcha.
And so we stood up and we advocated, and we had just enough time to do it. That, but for us, it was going to take well over a decade. And realistically, with 976, so with reduced state funding, uncertain state funding, and a pandemic, it's like Riverside is going to be partially worked on this year. It's not going to be fully done. So Sprague wouldn't have been started for another 5 or 6 more years after that done.
Wow.
So, but for us, this wouldn't have happened. And so we've invested $4 million in this project on top of $3.2 million of our own dollars for this bridge. But we believe it's important that these are critical connection points. I don't know if you're aware, the guts of that street hadn't been touched in over 100 years.
Wow.
The surface since 1985. So this was not conducive. It was not consistent with building buildings that needed the infrastructure and the appearance. The South Side there had some kind of nasty names that are just pretty much doesn't make any sense in the current context. But when you underinvest in a community for decades, so I think that was the challenging thing, because we had to press into really great relationship and kind of risk some things there. And we had to commit a significant amount of funds that we didn't know, build it and they will come. And now we can know, build it and they are coming.
That's great. Fantastic.
That's awesome.
All right. So my last question in this series is most personal. What's the most personal project that you like? It's like your baby, or I don't know, something.
That's a really challenging question, because I really do love all of this. It's something that just popped into my head that I'm going to go with.
They're all your babies. You don't have a favorite. I tell my kids that all the time.
But you're my favorite. So while I'm thrilled about the number of people that are going to be able to live, work, learn, and play in the district, I think the thing that I'm really excited about is another acronym, SEDS. That's what he says. So the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. When you lead an organization, it's always a challenge of, are you making it in your own interest, or are you serving the mission? That's really been a challenge with this organization. We're small enough that it's easy for it to really become an extension of me, and I need to be serving the mission. And so those two organizations, the Public Development Authority and the Development Association, we have been able to, it's kind of like an empty nest syndrome, like the PDA. Oh my gosh, it's graduated, it's off, it's running, it's independent. Oh shoot, what do we do? And so I've really tried to welcome the board, and they've been incredibly responsive to say, we were created to build and leverage the building is kind of taking care of itself and the PDA can handle that. What would it look like to really focus on making sure that what's here has a global impact, is locally relevant, that we're regionally competitive, but really has a potential for a global impact. And so what's really personal and excitingly connected to our work is the EDA has funding for a lot of different things, but Spokane, we don't have kind of an updated plan about how do we want to compete? What makes us stand out? And Greater Spokane Incorporated, great partner, love working with them. And they are forced to be a lot of things to a lot of people. And so we had the opportunity to stand up during the pandemic while they were focusing on helping businesses respond to that, to say, hey, there's some funding available to relook at our plan about what are the strategies, what are the industries that we focus on, and how to, as a community, can we be more resilient? And so what I'm excited about is that as a community, for us to be competitive, when we took a Momentum 87, going back to some of that original heritage, our region will not be safe unless we are also resilient. As if the global economy is a knowledge economy, are we competitive and are our people ready to participate? So this is not about one degree, this is about lifetime learning. And are we ready for that? And are our employers ready for that? And do we have researchers and innovators that will keep on driving the engine, again, that we have transmission lines and other things, drivetrains to other parts of the community that create opportunity, but do we own that? In a knowledge economy, we're really critical in that, so we can't drop the ball for the region. And so this strategy, this planning process is just kicking off, and I hope people are aware and are engaged, because it looks at how do we all fit together. As an example, so for the Catalyst building, the Valley has Katerra's cross-laminate timber factory that put, and again, from now, we can help our regional forests. We can fight forest fires and other things through that, through some strategic harvesting. And it goes into buildings like this that are fabricated in the Valley, built here in town. And the Overcast business that I mentioned, they're located out and they're building a new space out in Airway Heights. It's one of many things that show how we're connected.
Right.
And so we're not, yes, we're going to compete at times, but what's good for the region is good for the region. And so how do we see how we pull together? And this strategy, both in the process, the strategy and the implementation, is something that I'm looking forward to, because it will force us to be accountable of what we're contributing, but it also will bring the region together to show how we sink or we swim, we grow together.
Yeah. I actually, it's kind of cool when you talk about the timbers in that building. We were doing some reading before we had this conversation with you. I know Matt had looked into it way back when, but we looked at it again, and how the timbers that they make, they don't need more than 12 inches. So there's no old growth in the timbers, and we're not using steel, and it's sustainable, and they're able to go in and clean up forests of the small growth. It's a very fascinating and cool thing that they've come up with. And the fact that the factory, is that the right word, is here in Spokane area is just so cool. I just love it. I love it.
We're doing that a little up north, and they're doing some phenomenally innovative stuff. So it's not just the global companies that are connected here, but local. There's just a lot of opportunities. So
say the name. I missed the name of what you said was up north.
Vaughan Timbers.
Okay.
So the Vaughan brothers, they each have kind of different role in it. But there's another CLT, a local one, up north on 395, stopping at Claytonburg. But yeah, it's amazing, and we've got some great resources that when you look at this, it can make your forest safer, it can create jobs, and it can store carbon in the buildings, and that timber can be repurposed. In Europe, you look at different buildings that after they've finished their useful life, just like the old timbers in historic buildings, don't just tear it down and throw it in the rubbish bin. Like, you can repurpose that stuff. And CLT works the same way.
That's fantastic.
That's really cool.
All right. I have kind of my wrap up questions. Do you have anything else you want to ask?
And I don't know. I feel like we're close to the wrap up. I know we talked a little bit before we started the recording on condos. Most of the projects that we were talking about in U District are not ownership based. And can you speak a little bit to, I mean, as real estate brokers, obviously sales and housing, like ownership housing is important to us. Like, where do you see, and maybe that's where the direction we go with the question, Lars, is where do you see condo ownership going in the U District as it continues to evolve, and just any personal thoughts you have on that?
Yeah. So my first home was a condo, and it was a $71,000 condo. And I think something that is interesting for our community, whenever I have these conversations, many people think condos are only for the wealthy.
Right.
And my mom's a retired teacher, and when she was brought her back and helped her move to this area, I wanted to ideally find an affordable condo so that we could stabilize her costs, so that she wouldn't be at the hand of a landlord that needed to keep on increasing rents, either opportunistically or just realistically.
Right.
And I could not find a good option for her. And so in the end, I'm grateful that I had the resources. I was able to find a duplex. And so she's living in one side of that. But if she could have had access to a condo, because she could have been more self-sufficient.
Right.
Right.
And for how many people don't have sons that are able or willing to do that? And so that's one of the things that people that are starting out or they're trying to downsize, that have limited assets or cash flow, we don't really have that fit. So I think we will see more condos in Spokane and the University District. What I'm nervous about is I lived in South Florida during the housing boom. And one of the things that happened was tens of thousands of units across that metropolitan area were converted from rental into condos. And if you think that rental prices are increasing now, and it's hard to find rentals now, imagine if we had hundreds and possibly thousands of apartment units getting converted into condos.
Interesting.
Right.
And we've experienced that a little bit. But right now, I know there's developers that are building apartments at condo specs so that they can wait the 10 years and convert them. And so I think as a community, we have to pursue adding condos as an option, not just for Spokane, but for every community. Can you imagine if Deer Park and other communities, that people that have lived their entire lives had an option to be able to age in place in a community that was that fit their current needs? Condos are not just an urban need, but they're definitely a good fit here because it allows for long-term residents that own and live in and care about their community in ways that someone that lives there for a year or two just won't, just because they just haven't gotten to know their community in the same way. So I think it's a critical issue. There's been some improvements. We'll see some development that will probably make sense as a condo. But my bigger concern is that we're building amazing apartments that someday will be taken out of the space that, a lot of the students here, we've got some amazing people that aren't in a position yet to buy.
Right.
We want a community that welcomes people of all types of backgrounds, income levels, to have a healthy, successful community. Right now, we're missing out on the ownership option, but we could overcorrect on that if we're not careful.
Thank you for that. That's a really interesting perspective that I had not thought of, because I do know developers who are doing exactly what you're talking about. That's not a fairy tale. That's a real thing that's happening. And they're going to create a crisis whenever they end up doing that, won't they? I mean, that's a real, and I love this idea of having condos in places like Deer Park, where people don't have to move into Spokane to retire, that they could do away with taking care of the lawn and, having to take care of all the things that a house has, but it's great. I love it.
Just the concept of a condo being something that has an affordability that is anticipated, right? Like, you're not going to, next year when your lease is up, you're not going to, as we mentioned earlier, Spokane has had some of the highest increase in rents in the state, if not the highest. And that's not like the unknown of that, especially if you're on a fixed income, like your mom would be, like in a retirement scenario, like you can't risk having your rent go up by 20% next year. And
Yeah.
so the importance of that as well.
All right. So here are my two ending questions. Okay. They're going to be easy. These are softballs. Okay, Lars? Okay. So my first question. So we are seeing the light at the end of the tunnel with COVID. And so my question for you is, what are you most looking forward to doing that you haven't been able to do during COVID here in Spokane? And then what is the thing that you are looking forward to most doing outside of Spokane?
I am looking forward here in Spokane to be able to be up close and personal with people without thinking that I'm putting someone at risk. I lived for 15 years in the subtropics in very warm culture, so I'm a hugger where there's consent. But I miss being able to be connected with people in that way that's also respectful of their safety and the people that are vulnerable in their lives. And so I think that connects to I'm a dual citizen. My dad grew up just north of town, but my mom is Canadian. And most of my family on that side is now in southern BC. And man, I cannot wait to get over there. I've got a 93-year-old and a 90-year-old set of grandparents that are still alive.
Oh, wow.
And I want to see them.
Yeah.
And so I think we all have family that are it's harder to see. And so I think if anything, we all miss travel and restaurants and some of these things, but I think the relationships and their health has been proven to be the most important. And so for me, if it's locally or globally, that's the thing I'm most excited about.
You're so much better than me. I was like, I can't wait to go to AMC and to travel to Europe. You're a much better man, obviously. Well, Lars, we want to just thank you for taking the time to talk to us today, to answer all of our questions. Fascinating conversation. Just super excited. I'm sure we'll probably end up splitting this into two parts. We just said we wanted to have the conversation and not worry about time. And so thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, I think we hit exactly what the last time I listened to you talk was ignited inspiration about what was happening in my own city. And I appreciate that infectiousness that you have in the energy and the excitement around the growth and the opportunity and what Spokane is and what Spokane is becoming. And so thank you for sharing that with us and with all of our listeners and viewers.
Yeah. So everybody, thank you so much for being here. We will see you next week. If you have any questions, please give us a call, 509-62-HOUSE, or just visit us online, EvoReal, EvoReal. You can put it into Facebook or whatever you need to. Okay. All right. Thanks so much for being here. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.